In the quiet countryside of eastern France, far from any city noise, lived a thin, restless boy named Louis Vuitton. He was only 13 years old, but he already felt much older, as if life had forced him to grow too fast. Louis did not grow up in comfort. His mother had passed away when he was still young, and his father tried his best to raise him, but the home was never warm again. When his father remarried, the house changed completely. His stepmother was strict, impatient, and often unkind. She treated Louis as if he were an extra burden rather than a child who needed care every day. Louis felt more trapped every night. He stared out the small window of his room and dreamed of a place far away, a place where he could build a new life. One early morning, before the sun had fully risen, Louis made a decision that would shape his destiny. He packed a tiny cloth bag, just a piece of bread, a little cheese, and a simple pocket knife. He looked around the small wooden house one last time. No one was awake. No one would miss him. He stepped outside, closed the door gently behind him, and began walking. Where was he going? To Paris, the city of opportunity, the city of dreams. In today's world, traveling to another city is easy. You take a bus, a train, or even a plane. But in 1835, for a poor boy like Louis, reaching Paris meant something almost impossible. Walking more than 450 kilometers with no money, no guidance, and no guarantee of safety. The first few days were exciting. Louis felt free for the first time. He walked through forests, beside streams, and across quiet fields. Birds sang, the wind carried warm summer air, and Louis believed he had made the right choice. But soon the excitement faded. By the end of the first week, the bread was gone. By the second week, Louis's clothes were soaked from rainstorms, and he had no place to dry them. At night, he slept anywhere he could, inside barns, under wooden carts, beneath trees. He was not just a traveler. He was homeless still. Each morning, he stood up, brushed the dirt from his clothes, and said to himself, "Keep walking. Paris is waiting for you." Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. The long walk to Paris would take him nearly 2 full years, and on that lonely road, Louis learned the most important lesson of his life. If you want your dream, you must fight for it, even when you have nothing. What waited for him in Paris? Would he survive? Would someone help him? Or would the city swallow him whole? The real story begins when he finally reaches that city of light. Louis kept walking. Day after day. Month after month. The road to Paris was not a journey, it was a battle. A quiet, lonely battle that only he could fight. During the cold autumn months, the leaves turned orange and fell around him as he moved through the countryside. His shoes grew thinner every week. Soon, the soles had tiny holes. When he stepped into a puddle, his feet froze. Still, he kept going. Sometimes he found small jobs in villages he passed through. He carried firewood. He cleaned stables. He helped farmers lift heavy sacks of grain. In exchange, they gave him a bowl of soup, a piece of bread, or a warm place to sleep. Louis never complained. Even the simplest meal felt like a gift. But there were dark days, too, days when hunger twisted his stomach, when he walked for hours without seeing another person, when rain soaked him until he shivered uncontrollably. One night, after a heavy storm, he found shelter inside an abandoned shed. The roof leaked, and he could hear the wind howling through the broken walls. Louis was cold, exhausted, and scared. For a moment, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Maybe he should have stayed in his village, even if life there was painful. But then he remembered why he left. He remembered the cold eyes of his stepmother, the loneliness inside his home, the feeling that the world was bigger than his tiny village. And so he whispered to himself, "I will reach Paris. I have to." That promise kept him alive. Sun with small cloud, a new strength. As months passed, Louis grew stronger. His legs became powerful from walking. His hands grew rough from work. He learned how to survive on little, how to recognize helpful people, and how to avoid dangerous ones. Sometimes travelers passed by him on wagons. They looked at the dusty boy walking alone, but most didn't speak. A few gave him fruit or water. One old man gave him a wool scarf, saying, "Paris is far, boy. But if you're brave enough to walk there, you'll be brave enough to live there." Louis held onto those words. Cityscape at dusk, the first glimpse of a dream. Nearly 2 years after leaving home, Louis climbed a small hill. On the other side, the land dipped down toward a giant, moving city. Smoke rose from chimneys. Carriages rolled through the streets. Church bells rang. That city was Paris. Louis stopped walking, his eyes filled with tears. He had finally reached the place he had dreamed about every night. Paris looked huge, loud, and powerful, completely different from his village. But Louis didn't feel scared. After all the suffering and struggle, he felt something else, hope. He stepped forward, ready to begin a new chapter of his life. What he didn't know was that Paris would challenge him more than anything he had ever faced, and it would also make him the man the world would remember forever. When Louis finally walked into Paris, he expected magic, bright streets, friendly faces, endless opportunities, but the reality was very different. The city was huge, crowded, and loud. People rushed past him as if he were invisible. Carriages rattled on the cobblestone streets. Shopkeepers shouted prices. Smoke filled the air from factories. Paris was alive, but it did not welcome him. Louis quickly realized one harsh truth: dreaming of Paris was easy. Surviving in Paris would be hard. Crescent Moon alone in the city. Louis had no family, no money, and no home. That first night, he wandered the streets looking for a safe place to sleep. He tried to rest near the River Seine, but a policeman told him to move. He walked until he found a narrow alley behind a bakery. The smell of warm bread floated through the night air. Louis slid down against a wall, hugged his knees to his chest, and tried to sleep. He was still hungry, still cold, still a boy alone in the biggest city in France, but now he was closer to his dream than ever before. Sun with rays searching for work. The next morning, Louis woke with stiff legs and an empty stomach. He stood up and began walking door to door, shop to shop, workshop to workshop. He asked everyone the same thing: "Please, sir, do you have any work I can do?" Most people didn't even look at him. Some shook their heads. Others laughed at his appearance, his torn shirt, muddy shoes, and tired eyes. Still, Louis did not give up. He kept walking. He kept asking. A chance at last, late in the afternoon, when his legs felt heavy and his hope was fading, Louis stepped into a small workshop filled with the smell of fresh wood. Inside, men were shaping boxes and trunks. Sawdust covered the floor. Tools hung neatly on the walls. The workshop felt warm, alive, and full of skill. A man with grey hair and gentle eyes looked at Louis. "What do you want, boy?" he asked. Louis took a deep breath. "I want to work, sir. I'll do anything. I learn fast." The man studied him for a moment. Louis expected another rejection, but instead, the man nodded. "My name is Monsieur Miracle," he said. "I make travel trunks. If you're willing to work hard, I'll teach you." Louis's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. This was the door he had been searching for. Not a door to a job, but a door to a future, a hammer, a new beginning. Monsieur Miracle gave Louis his first task: sweeping the workshop floor. It wasn't glamorous, but Louis did it with full energy. Every sweep of the broom felt like a step toward a new life. That night, for the first time in Paris, Louis slept inside a building. He had a thin blanket and a small corner to call his own. It wasn't much, but to him, it was everything. Louis closed his eyes and whispered, "This is only the beginning." And he was right. What he would learn in that workshop would transform him forever, and eventually change the history of fashion around the world. Louis's new life began inside the warm, wooden walls of Monsieur Miracle's workshop. It wasn't big or fancy, but to Louis, it felt like a palace. The air always smelled of freshly cut wood, glue, and leather. Men worked with focus, their hands moving with confidence and experience. Tools clicked, hammers tapped, and thin curls of wood fell to the floor like soft ribbons. For the first time since leaving home, Louis felt that he had a purpose. Starting from the bottom at first, Louis did the simplest jobs. He swept the floors. He gathered wood scraps. He ran to the market to buy nails, glue, and fabric, but he did these tasks with such care that the other workers noticed. "He really works." One of them whispered, "He really wants this." Another said Louis didn't complain, didn't ask for praise, and didn't try to skip steps. He understood something important: if you want to master a craft, you must respect every part of it, even the smallest jobs. The first lessons. After a few months, Monsieur Miracle finally allowed Louis to help with real trunk-making tasks. He taught him how to choose wood that was strong but light, how to saw straight lines without wasting material, how to bend thin pieces of wood to create smooth edges, how to attach leather so it lay perfectly flat. Louis watched everything carefully. He studied every movement, every technique, every detail. The day after day, he practiced until his hands learned the work by memory. His fingers grew rough and strong. His back ached at night, but he felt proud, prouder than he had ever felt in his life. School satchel, a gift for detail. Louis discovered something special about himself. He noticed details that other workers missed. If a line was slightly crooked, Louis saw it. If the leather wasn't perfectly smooth, he felt it. If a nail was even a little off-center, he fixed it. Customers began to ask, "Who made this one?" And the older workers would reply, almost surprised, "The boy, Louis." His reputation was growing, quietly but steadily. Top hat trunks for the modern traveler. Paris was changing. People were traveling more, by train, by carriage, by ship. And travelers needed strong, beautiful trunks to carry their belongings. Louis loved this idea. He didn't just build trunks, he imagined how people would use them. He imagined the long journeys, the distant countries, the elegant hotels. He didn't know it yet, but this imagination would one day revolutionize the entire travel world. Crescent moon nights of practice while others went home. Louis stayed late in the workshop. He practiced cutting. He practiced shaping. He practiced fixing mistakes until his work reached perfection. Sometimes Monsieur Miracle watched from the doorway with a proud smile. "You have a rare gift, Louis," he said once. "You don't just build trunks. You understand them." Those words stayed with Louis, words of encouragement he had never heard at home. Glowing star, becoming the best. After a few years, Louis was no longer the boy who swept floors. He was one of the best young craftsmen in Paris. Customers recognized his careful hands, workers respected his dedication, and Monsieur Miracle trusted him like a son. Louis had come a long way from the lonely road he once walked. But his journey was far from over, because soon, someone very important would enter his life, someone who would change everything, someone from the palace. Louis was now known in Paris as the young craftsman with careful hands. His trunks were strong, smooth, beautifully shaped, and always perfectly finished. Word traveled quickly in the city, especially among wealthy families, but Louis never imagined that one day, his name would reach the French royal palace. Crown a visit from the palace. One crisp morning, Monsieur Miracle's workshop was busier than usual. The workers whispered among themselves and cleaned the space more carefully than ever. Louis didn't understand why until a tall man dressed in elegant clothing stepped inside. His coat was made of fine blue wool. His boots were polished until they shined. He carried himself like someone who had never worked a hard day in his life. The room fell silent. "I am looking for a skilled packer," the man announced. "Someone trusted. Someone precise." Monsieur Miracle nodded toward Louis. "This is the one you want," he said. "He sees everything." The elegant man studied Louis from head to toe, his simple shirt, his rough hands, his calm eyes. "What is your name, boy?" "Louis Vuitton, sir." The man's lips curved slightly, almost like a smile. "The Empress Eugenie requires someone to prepare her travel belongings. If you are as good as your master says, come with me." Louis froze. The Empress Eugenie, the wife of Emperor Napoleon III, was the most fashionable, most admired woman in all of France. People talked about her beauty, her style, her elegance. To work for her was an honor almost no one received. Louis' heart raced, his hand shook slightly, but he nodded. "Yes, sir. I'll come." European castle inside the royal world. Entering the palace was like stepping into another universe. There were tall ceilings painted with gold details, giant mirrors decorated the walls, chandeliers sparkled above him like stars caught inside glass. Louis felt small, but he reminded himself of who he was now, a skilled craftsman, a boy who had walked across France to fight for a better life. The Empress's assistant led him to a private room filled with dresses, hats, gloves, jewelry boxes, and delicate fabrics from all over the world. Then she entered. Empress Eugenie. She moved with grace. Her dress shimmered with silver threads. She looked at Louis thoughtfully. "So," she said, "you are the young man everyone talks about." Louis bowed slightly. "I will take great care of your belongings, Your Majesty." She handed him a silk scarf. "Show me," she said. "School satchel." The test. Louis examined the items carefully and began packing them into a trunk, not quickly, not carelessly. He folded each dress gently, placed small boxes in the corners, wrapped fragile accessories with cloth, and arranged everything so it fit neatly without being crushed. As he worked, he forgot where he was. He forgot the palace. He forgot the Empress standing behind him. He focused only on the craft. On precision. On excellence. When he finished, the Empress stepped forward and touched one of the neatly placed gowns. "You have respect for the things you handle," she said softly, "and you understand beauty. I like that." Louis held his breath. She continued, "You will work for me." Those 5 words changed his life. Rocket, a new world opened. Serving the Empress taught Louis things he could never learn in a workshop: how the wealthy traveled, what they valued, what they needed, and how style mattered as much as strength. He traveled with her team, helped organize her outfits, and prepared her trunks for long journeys. He saw fine art, elegant furniture, and the most luxurious clothing in Europe. He didn't just learn how to pack items, he learned what luxury meant, and without realizing it, Louis was studying the very world he would one day lead. Working for Empress Eugenie changed Louis's life in ways he never expected. He learned elegance. He learned organization. He learned what wealthy travelers wanted, and what they hated. Most importantly, he learned that people respected skill, creativity, and reliability. But after years of serving the Empress and creating trunks for the most important families in France, a quiet desire began to grow inside him. A desire to build something that belonged to him. Cityscape at dusk. Paris was changing, and so was Louis. The 1850s were a new era in Paris. Factories were rising, railroads were expanding. Travel was becoming more common than ever. People wanted modern luggage, lighter, stronger, and easier to carry. But most trunk makers were stuck in the past, still building big, heavy, rounded trunks that were impossible to stack on trains and carriages. Louis watched travelers struggle with these old-fashioned trunks and thought, I can make something better. He knew the market was changing. He knew the world was moving forward, and he wanted to lead that change, but he couldn't do it while working for someone else. The decision that changed everything. One cool evening, Louis walked along the quiet streets near the Seine River. The water reflected the golden lights of the city. He thought about his life. He had walked hundreds of miles. He had slept on streets. He had studied under a master. He had served royalty, and now he felt ready for the next step. A bold, impossible step. He whispered to himself, it's time. I will open my own workshop. The idea scared him. He had very little money. He had no business experience, and Paris was full of competition. But Louis wasn't the same boy who once slept under bridges. He had strength now, skill, a vision, and most importantly, courage. Shopping bags. Opening the first Louis Vuitton store, 1854, Louis rented a tiny shop on Rue Neuve des Capucines, a busy street in Paris. It wasn't big. It wasn't fancy. The front room was just enough for a workbench, a few tools, and some wood. But to Louis, it felt like the beginning of an empire. Above the door, he placed a simple sign, Louis Vuitton, trunks and packing services. People walking by the building didn't know it yet, but they had just passed the birthplace of one of the greatest luxury brands in history. A new kind of trunk inside his shop. Louis worked day and night. He wanted to create something the world had never seen. Something smart. Something useful. Something elegant. Then he had an idea, a simple idea that would revolutionize travel forever. A flat-top trunk. Until that time, trunks were rounded on top so rain could roll off. But rounded trunks couldn't be stacked or neatly stored. Louis's new trunk design was flat on top, lightweight, waterproof, covered with stylish gray canvas and perfectly shaped for stacking. People were amazed. Look at this. It's modern. It's so easy to pack. This is the future of travel. The trunk became an instant success. Suddenly, Louis wasn't just a craftsman. He was an inventor, party popper. The beginning of success. Orders flooded into the shop. Travelers, aristocrats, and fashionable families all wanted one of Louis's new trunks. They loved the style, the strength, and the modern look. Louis hired a few workers, then he hired more. He opened a larger workshop outside the city, and every day, he reminded himself of the boy he used to be, the homeless boy with torn shoes, walking through rain, promising himself a better life. He had come far, but his journey was not over. He was about to face challenges that would test everything he built. Louis's new trunks were admired all over Paris. They were modern, they were elegant, they were stronger and lighter than anything people had seen before. For the first time in his life, Louis felt truly proud. He had created something with his own hands, something that made travel easier for thousands of people. But success doesn't only attract customers. It attracts competition, and sometimes enemies. Warning sign: copycats and imitators. As Louis's trunks became famous, other craftsmen tried to copy them. Some shops made cheap versions of his designs, others painted their trunks to look exactly like Louis's. This angered him, not because he wanted to be rich, but because he cared about quality. He would say, a copy is not the same as creation. A copy has no soul. Louis knew that if people bought the fake trunks and they broke easily, customers might blame him. He needed a way to protect his work, but he didn't know how. Yet a crisis, the Franco-Prussian War. Then things got worse. In 1870, war broke out between France and Prussia. Paris was surrounded, attacked, and eventually starved. Businesses closed. Streets emptied. People struggled just to survive. Louis's workshop was destroyed during the chaos. His tools were stolen, his materials were ruined, everything he had built seemed to disappear overnight. For the second time in his life, Louis had lost everything, but this time, he wasn't a scared 13-year-old boy. He was a grown man with skills, discipline, and determination. He looked at the rubble of his workshop and said, "I have rebuilt before. I will rebuild again, hammer and wrench, starting again from zero." When the war finally ended, Paris tried to heal. Louis found a small space in the city and reopened his workshop with whatever materials he could find. Money was tight, times were hard, but Louis worked with the same energy he had as a young apprentice. Slowly, customers began returning. They saw that even after war, even after destruction, Louis's craftsmanship was still unmatched. Artist palette signature look. Louis realized something important. If other companies were copying his trunks, he needed a design they couldn't copy. So he created a new pattern, a beautiful striped canvas, beige and red, that was stronger and more recognizable than anything on the market. When people saw that striped design, they immediately said, "Oh, that's a Louis Vuitton." This pattern was the start of something bigger, the beginning of Louis Vuitton's fight against imitation and the birth of the idea that a brand could have a signature identity. Bella returned to greatness. Business was booming again. Louis hired more workers. He expanded his workshop. He continued to innovate. Travel was becoming global now, trains, ships, and soon, even early automobiles. The world was moving fast, and Louis was moving with it, designing luggage for every kind of journey. Yet he remained humble. He still fixed trunks by hand. He still checked every piece before it left the workshop. He still believed that quality was the soul of his work. Louis often told his workers, "Make every trunk as if it were for a queen." And he meant it. Sunrise, a new generation watching during these years. Louis's young son, Georges Vuitton, often watched his father work. He studied his father's hands, his patience, his ideas. Louis didn't realize it yet, but Georges was learning more than craftsmanship. He was learning leadership. The father had opened the door, the son would one day walk through it. But first, Louis had more challenges to face. Big challenges. Brand-changing challenges. Louis stood frozen in the workshop, his fingers still touching the patterned canvas. All the other craftsmen stared at him, waiting for him to speak. Monsieur Renault, the senior craftsman, raised an eyebrow. "Well," he said. "Explain yourself, boy." Louis swallowed hard. With a calm voice, he said, I thought the trunks could be lighter. People travel more now. They need something easier to carry. So I tried this." Renault looked at the material again. "And what is this pattern?" Louis took a breath. "It's my idea. A canvas design that doesn't scratch easily and keeps the trunk waterproof. I thought it could help." Before he could finish, Renault burst into laughter. "A boy with no home, no family, and barely any money wants to teach us how to make trunks." The other workers chuckled. Louis felt the heat rise in his face, but he didn't look away. Then, someone at the door cleared their throat. Everyone turned. It was Monsieur Miracle, the owner of the workshop. He had heard everything. "Let me see that canvas," he said. Renault quickly handed it over. Miracle studied it carefully. He bent it, pulled it, ran his fingers across the surface. Then, without warning, he walked right up to Louis. "Where did you learn to make this?" Louis answered honestly, "In my village. I used to repair bags for travelers. They taught me little things. I combined them with what I learned here." Miracle nodded slowly. "Young man," he said, "you may not have experience, but you have vision. Real vision." Renault's smile faded immediately. Miracle raised the canvas and announced to the workshop, "This is the future. Travelers need something different, something strong, something elegant. And this canvas, this idea, it is special." Then he turned to Louis again. "From today, you will work directly under me. I want you to keep experimenting. Keep creating." Louis blinked. Shocked him? A poor boy? Working beside the owner, the workers whispered among themselves, some surprised, some jealous, but Louis didn't pay attention to them. For the first time in his life, someone important believed in him. As he walked home that evening, the cold Paris wind didn't feel cold at all. His heart was warm, filled with hope. He looked up at the sky and whispered to himself, "This is just the beginning." Little did he know, this moment was the turning point that would change not only his life, but also the future of luxury fashion forever. Weeks passed, and Louis worked harder than he ever had before. Every day, he arrived at the workshop before everyone else. He swept the floors, organized tools, and then spent hours experimenting with new materials. The other craftsmen kept watching him, sometimes with curiosity, sometimes with envy, but Louis didn't care. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was building something that mattered. One morning, Monsieur Miracle called for him. Louis, he shouted across the workshop. Louis dropped what he was doing and rushed to the office. He expected trouble, but instead, he found Miracle smiling. "Pack your tools," the owner said. "We're going to the Tuileries Palace." Louis froze. The palace? Why? Miracle leaned forward. "A member of the royal family heard about our new waterproof canvas. They want to see it." Louis's heart almost stopped. Royal family? Him? A poor boy who once slept in the streets. Within an hour, he was standing in the grand halls of the palace. The ceilings were painted with angels, the floors polished until they shined like mirrors. He felt small, yet filled with determination. A woman entered the room, elegant and confident. It was Empress Eugenie, the wife of Emperor Napoleon III, one of the most powerful women in France. Miracle bowed deeply. Louis followed, trying not to tremble. The Empress looked directly at Louis. "So," she said softly, "you are the young man who created the new canvas everyone is talking about." Louis swallowed and nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty." She walked around the trunk he had made, gently tapping the material with her gloved fingers. "It is strong," she said. "But also beautiful. Where did you learn craftsmanship like this?" Louis hesitated. Should he tell her the truth? He decided, yes, I learned it by watching others, and by practicing, whenever I could. I didn't have much, but I always tried to make things better. The Empress smiled. "A heart like that," she said, "creates art." She turned to Miracle. "I want this young man to design custom trunks for my personal wardrobe. He has a natural gift." Miracle's eyes widened. "Of course, Your Majesty." But Louis could barely breathe. When the Empress left, Miracle placed a hand on Louis's shoulder. "You just became the royal trunk maker," he whispered. Louis felt the world spin around him. A boy who once had nothing, now chosen by royalty. As they left the palace, Louis kept touching the front of his jacket, where the Empress had lightly tapped his chest and said, "A heart like that creates art." Those words stayed with him. He understood something that day, something powerful. Talent can come from anywhere. Dreams can start in the dirt, but destiny waits for the brave. He wasn't just making trunks anymore. He was crafting a future. The royal appointment changed everything. Within weeks, Louis found himself busier than ever. Orders poured into the workshop, wealthy travelers, nobles, diplomats, all wanting trunks like the ones he made for the Empress. But something inside Louis was shifting. He loved the craft. He loved creating, but he wanted something more, something that belonged to him. One evening, after a long day of work, he sat alone in the workshop. The candles flickered, casting soft shadows across the tools and canvases on the table. Louis stared at the burning flame and whispered to himself, "One day, I will open my own shop. My own name on my work." He wasn't sure how. He wasn't sure when, but the dream burned inside him. A few months later, when Emperor Napoleon III announced the rebuilding of Paris, opportunities appeared everywhere. New roads, new shops, new people. And with them, new demand for modern luggage. Louis approached Monsieur Miracle. "I want to start my own workshop," he said. Miracle looked at him with pride and sadness. "You've outgrown this place," he said. "Go. Create your future." And so, with his savings, a small room, and a big dream, Louis rented a tiny workshop on Rue Neuve des Capucines, right in the heart of the new Paris. He hung a small wooden sign outside. "Louis Vuitton, maletier, Louis Vuitton, trunk maker." The first days were difficult. Some days he had no customers, only silence. Other days he repaired old bags just to earn a few coins. But Louis didn't give up. He worked with a passion stronger than hunger, stronger than fear. He created a new kind of flat-top trunk, easier to stack, easier to store. Travelers loved it. News spread quickly. Soon, carriages lined up outside his shop. Every day, more people came. Every day, his reputation grew. Years later, his business expanded beyond anything he ever imagined. His designs traveled across oceans, appeared in royal courts, and became symbols of elegance around the world. And one morning, While walking past his busy shop, Louis paused. He watched his workers crafting trunks with care, his trunks, his canvas, his vision. A soft smile spread across his face. He remembered the cold nights he spent sleeping on the streets. He remembered the long walk from his village. He remembered being laughed at, ignored, underestimated. He remembered the moment someone finally believed in him and he whispered, "I made it." That homeless boy, that hungry dreamer, that quiet apprentice, he became Louis Vuitton, founder of one of the greatest luxury brands in history. His story became a reminder to the world: greatness can start anywhere, even with a boy who had nothing except courage, creativity, and an unbreakable dream.